Hi there. Recently, I uploaded a beginner's tutorial for the puzzles known as Killer Sudoku. It occurred to me then that the best way to explain how to do Killer Sudoku would be to work through one on screen, explaining how it's solved. And that's what you're looking at now. However, that tutorial was animated, and since then I've had people telling me that my animations are weird and creepy. I prefer to describe it as an acquired taste, but still, I try to cater to all tastes, so this particular video won't be animated. Ooh. Sorry about that. However, if you haven't watched my tutorial, you might like to do so now, so that both you and I are singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. I've linked it in the description. Now, that's the puzzle I'm going to solve for your entertainment, and you'll notice one thing immediately. Instead of cages surrounded by dotted lines, which are difficult to draw, my cages are colour-coded. It's something you're going to have to get used to. Secondly, if you're not that familiar with Killer Sudokus, you might want to make good use of the pause and rewind buttons on this video, as I intend to go at a fair pace. In fact, I would advise viewers generally to keep the mouse pointer over the pause icon, or your finger over the K key, ready to pause the video at the crucial points. Right, let's get started. When faced with a blank puzzle, a good first step is to look for standard combinations that you can fill in. There are several of them here, and I shall work my way methodically across the rows from the top in order to make sure I don't miss any. At the top of column 4, we have 9 in 2. These two cells can contain any digit except 9. Next to that, there is 13 in 2, which is 4 and 9, or 5 and 8, or 6 and 7. It can't contain 1, 2, or 3. In the second row, there is 3 and 2. Clearly this can only be 1 and 2. Straddling columns 6 and 7, there is a 7 in 3, which is 1 plus 2 plus 4, in some order. And directly below that, there is 11 in 2. This can't contain a digit 1, of course. Over on the other side, there is another 7 in 3, which is also 1, 2 and 4. And on the same two rows, there is 23 in 3, which must be a combination of 6, 8 and 9. The last two rows contain 3 standard combinations, namely 15 in 2, which must be either 6 and 9 or 7 and 8. Then there is another 9 in 2 in the central column, directly below the first one. And finally 12 in 3 in the next two cells, which must be either 3 and 9 or 4 and 8 or 5 and 7. It can't contain 1, 2 or 6. That's as far as the standard combinations will take us. Not a bad haul for combinations. We've managed to fill quite a large portion of the grid with digits. Consider the upper left nonette, the one where we have marked the digits 1 and 2. We now know that those digits can't be anywhere else in that nonette, or in the second row of the puzzle, and we can fill in cells without those digits. I call this process tidying up, and believe me, I shall be doing an awful lot of it in this example. In our travels along the second row, we have to take the digits 1 and 2 out of the lower part of the 9 in 2. Since the pair of digits in that cage must add to 9, we have to remove 7 and 8 from the cell above. Consider the nonette in the upper right-hand corner. There are 2 cages contained entirely within this nonette, namely 27 and 16, and these two add to give 43. The rest of the nonette is taken up by a single cell. Since the total of all the cells in the nonette must give 45, that digit must be 2, bringing the 43 up to 45. We had already marked that cell with 1, 2 and 4, since it is part of the 7 in 3, and now we have worked out one of those digits. This acts as a useful double check that we haven't made a mistake. If we worked out that the cell must contain a 3, or an 8, or a 7, then we would know that we have made a mistake somewhere, and we would have to backtrack until we found it. But as it is, we have every reason to believe we're on the right track. Now for more tidying up. We can remove the digit 2 from every other cell in the third row, in the 7th column, and every other cell in that nonette, as shown. By doing so, we are blasting through another standard combination, the 11 in 2 on the central row. This loses the digit 2 in its right-hand cell, balanced by removing the corresponding digit 9 to its left. 2 plus 9 gives 11, you see. We're not quite done with the 7 in 3 yet, though. Consider the cell in row 4, column 6, in the notch of that 7 in 3 cage. The only possibilities for the cell above that one, or the cell to its right, are 1 and 4. Since both those cells are in the same cage, one of them will be digit 1 and the other will be digit 4. We don't know which one is which, but we do know that there will be a digit 1 to one side of row 4, column 6, and a digit 4 on another side. Either way, we know that the cell in question can't contain a 1 or a 4, so we can fill in all the digits in that cell except 1 and 4 as shown. The sharp-eyed viewer might have spotted that this is one of those killer Sudoku puzzles which have a line of symmetry. The cages in the top half are a mirror image of those in the lower half. Alternatively, you might come across puzzles which have rotational symmetry about the centre. Not all killer Sudoku puzzles are like that, but if you come across one, it allows you to apply the same strategies identically in two separate parts of the puzzle. Take a look at the bottom right nonette. This matches the same pattern as we found in the top right corner, and we can use the same strategy that we used to find a digit here. 13 plus 23 comes to 36, so the missing digit to bring the nonette up to 45 must be 9. Again, this agrees with what we already know about that cell. Phew! And it means that we can remove 9 from the other two cells in that cage as shown. More tidying up. I have removed digit 9 from all the other cells in that row, that column and that nonette. And we have ploughed our way through that 11 in 2 again. This time we have removed 9 from the right-hand cell in that cage, so the digit 2 in the left-hand cell must be removed. Now we know that whatever that 11 in 2 turns out to be, it can't be 2 and 9 in either order. And the same thing that applies to row 4, column 6, also applies to the cell in the notch of the 23 and 3, i.e. row 6, column 6. There is a 6 or an 8 to its right, and a 6 or an 8 below it, both of which are in the same cage. Whichever way round it is, row 6, column 6, must have a 6 on one side and an 8 on another. It itself can't be 6 or 8. A slightly different strategy now. Consider the middle nonette on the right-hand side, the one with the green 26 in 6 in it. Apart from that 26 in 6, there are 3 cells in column 7, one pink, one grey and one blue. Using the fact that this nonette's digits, like all the others, must come to a total of 45, means that these 3 cells must add to 19. Effectively, these 3 cells form a hidden cage of 19 in 3. The reason I mention that is because 19 in 3 cannot contain a digit 1. It's another standard combination. Think about it. Suppose you had 19 in 3 with digit 1 in it. What would the other 2 digits be? They would have to add to 18, making them both 9. That's impossible. Believe me, 19 in 3 cannot contain a 1. And yet we see that pink cell with both 1 and 4 in it. Well, not anymore, you don't. I have taken the digit 1 out of the cell in row 4, column 7. Now we've got that 7 in 3 entirely worked out, as we know where the digit 1 must be. We can also remove the digit 4 everywhere else in row 4 in column 7 and in that middle nonette on the right in a huge tidying up operation. One tidying up leads to another. Having worked out where the digit 1 is in that cage, we can remove it from all the other cells in row 3 and in column 6, and in that middle nonette at the top. Only a few moves in, and the majority of the grid is covered in digits. Not bad so far. One side effect of removing digit 1 from the nonette is that the 9 in 2 in that nonette can't contain a digit 8. A digit 8 will be paired up in that cage with a 1, and that's no longer possible. Now, I'm sure there have been some of you who've been just itching to know when I was getting around to mentioning that column on the far left, the one with a 24 in 4 at the top and 19 in 4 at the bottom. Columns, like nonettes, must add up to 45, and these 2 cages give 43, another shortfall of 2. So the green cell that sits between them must be 2 as shown. As soon as I've entered 2 in the cell, I can follow it up by tidying the middle row, the first column, and the other cells in that nonette, removing 2s wherever I find them. Since digits can't be repeated in a cage, I also have to remove the 2 in row 7, column 2. And if there had still been a 2 in the cell on row 3, column 2, I would have had to remove that as well, but it had already gone. As a rule, whenever a change is made to a cell, it's always a good idea to follow it with extensive tidying up. I know what you're all thinking. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. I bet Richard's house is so clean and tidy it sparkles. Well, no, you should see my house. It's a right garbage dump. You might also have spotted that the rule of 45 applies equally well to the central cell of the grid. That red line is drawn so that no cage crosses it, giving a dead straight line with the exception of that central cell. If you add all the cages to the left of that line, you get 183. 4 complete columns will give 180, so the excess cell must be 3. Which is inevitably followed by tidying up, of course. All the 3s in the same row, column and nonette are removed. That column includes both the 9 in 2 at the top and the 1 at the bottom. If they can't contain a digit 3, then they can't contain digit 6 either, so out they go. Take a look at that 29 in 5 in yellow. It contains the central cell. If you remove the digit 3, you are left with 4 cells that add up to 26. The smallest digit it can contain is a 2, because the other 3 digits can't go above 24, which is 7 plus 8 plus 9. Each of those 4 other cells did have a digit 1 in them until I wiped them out. On the other side of the central digit, there is the 11 in 2. If it can't contain a digit 3, then it can't contain a digit 8 either. Bye-bye. Take a look at the lone digit 4, just above that grey 11 in 2. You've already established that together with the 2 digits directly below it, it forms an unwritten cage of 19 in 3. The other 2 digits must therefore come to 15, and there is only one combination of digits that works here, namely 7 above 8. Guess what happens now? That's right, I run around with the old feather duster tidying up. And we have finally found the exact combination of the 11 in 2. Since it contains a 7, the other digit must be 4. This is followed by removing all the 4s from the same row, column and nonette. Actually, it occurs to me that there's another digit we've found, the 6 in the 23 in 3. We never tidied up after finding that one. Still, easily remedied. There, that's better. Now we can work out what the composition of the 13 in 2 at the top of column 6 must be. The only pair of digits that work here is 5 and 8, although we don't know in which order, of course. Which is immediately followed by you-know-what. Like so. Same thing applies to the 12 in 2 at the bottom of that same column. It only contains 3, 7 and 9 at the moment. 3 plus 9 comes to 12, so those digit 7s are not wanted. And we immediately tidy up after that. You will notice that we have now found out where the digits 2 and 7 must be in that middle nonette, both in column 6. So we can remove both these digits from everywhere else in that nonette. We can't go along both those rows doing the same, as we don't know which one is 2 and which is 7. Now we have isolated the digit 1 in that other 7 in 3, the one to the lower left of the grid, and when we tidy up after that, like so, it tells us whether 2 and 4 are on row 7. This means that we can remove them from the rest of that row, like this. Take a look at that 9 in 2 at the top of the central column. One glance at this tells you there is only one combination of digits that fit here, a 2 on top of a 7, like this. And we can tidy up. Take the 2s and 7s out of the rest of that column and the other cells in that nonette, as well as the 2s from the rest of the top row and the 7s from the second row. Look at that 16 in 3 in red near the bottom of the central column, and let's make a supposition. Suppose the lowest cell of that cage contains digit 1. The other 2 cells in that cage would have to add up to 15. Can that be done? Clearly not. They would have to contain a 7 and an 8. No digit in that cage, or a 6 and a 9. Well, there are a 6 and a 9, but they're both in the same cell. Our original supposition can't be true. That 16 and 3 does not contain 1. This is an example of proof by contradiction. You suggest that something is true, follow it to its logical conclusion, and show that there's a contradiction, meaning that your original suggestion wasn't true, and you've learned something. It's all perfectly logical. The philosopher Socrates was always doing this, and if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us. Now, if you look up and down that central column, you will see that the digit 1 can only be in that lower 9 in 2. That cage must contain a 1 and an 8, which means we can remove all the 8s from the rest of that nonette and further up in the same column. Which in turn isolates the digit 5 in that bottom middle nonette, needing more tidying up. It's just like real housework, this. The moment you tidy up, you need to start over and do it all again. Looking at that 16 and 2 again, we can now see that the upper two cells must add to 11. There is only one combination that achieves this, 9 on the left, 2 on the right. Now we can finally do what we couldn't do a few steps back, and remove the 2's from row 6 and the 7's from row 4, like this. We also have the position of the 9 in that central column, requiring further tidying up. Furthermore, we have found the digit in the central nonette, so even more tidying up. And even more now that we have tracked down the 4 in the central column. Will this housework never end? Look at the 18 in 4 in yellow at the bottom of the grid. We know from column 4 that that cage must contain a 9, and that no digit can be duplicated in the cage. The 2 empty cells on the bottom row cannot therefore contain 7's, and we finally have at least one digit in every cell. Furthermore, the same cage can't contain a digit 9 either. Suppose it did. Suppose there was indeed a digit 9 in there. Together, the 9 and the 7 would add to 16, giving 2 cells to make the cage up to 18. What would that be? A digit 1 in both those cells? No way. Our original supposition must have been wrong, and there is no digit 9 in that cage. Speaking of digit 9s, there's a little trick we can use to whittle away at that 29 in 5 in yellow. Remember how we removed digits from those cells in the notches of the 7 in 3 and the 23 in 3? In the case of the 7, we knew that the cell must have had a digit 1 on one side and a digit 4 on the other, although we didn't know which was which. It was the same with the 23 in 3, but the cell in the notch must have had a 6 on one side and an 8 on another, so it can't contain either itself. Well, it's the same with the top digit in that 29 in 5. The cell to its right has a 5 or an 8 in it, and so does the cell below that. This means that the top cell in the 29 in 5 either has a 5 directly to its right and is in the same cage as an 8, or vice versa. What I'm trying to say is that the cell cannot itself be either a 5 or an 8. The only other possibility for that cell is a 9. Followed, of course, by the inevitable run around with the old Hoover. Having removed a 9 from one cell, in that 15 in 2 in the penultimate row, we have to remove the corresponding 6 in the other. Now we have to do something a little irksome, and that's consider the possibilities for that grey 18 in 3 just to the northwest of centre. The digit in row 4 can be either a 5 or an 8. Suppose it's a 5. That means that the other two digits must add to 13, and the only possible combination is a 7 followed by a 6. On the other hand, if the row 4 digit is 8, the other two digits must add to 10, and there can only be a 7 followed by a 3. This means that regardless of whether 18 in 3 contains a 5 or an 8, it must contain a 7, and we can remove all the other digits in that cell. You'll also notice that the cell to the right of digit 7 has also been reduced to a 3 or a 6. This gives us the two possible combinations for that cage, 7, 3, 8 or 7, 6, 5. After the obligatory tidy up, we are in a position to remove another digit from the 15 in 2 on the penultimate row. Since the right-hand cell can now only be a 6 or 8, the left-hand cell must now be either 7 or 9. Just as we found that the 18 and 4 at the bottom of the grid had to contain digit 7 in column 4, and couldn't therefore contain 7 anywhere else, we find the same thing at the top of the grid, in the 23 in 4. It must contain a digit 9 in column 4, so there can't be a 9 in column 2. Let's remove it. That's better. Now we do another suppose on the yellow 29 in 5. We already know two of those digits, the 3 and the 9. What's left? Well, those two digits add to 12, so the other 3 must add to 17, to make up the grand total of 29. Here's the suppose. Suppose there isn't a digit 8 in those 3 cells. Could they still make their total 17? Well, we will be left with only 4, 5 and 6, making a total of 50, thereby falling short of the necessary 17. This is another proof by contradiction. We assume that there wasn't a digit 8 in that cage, found that it didn't work, and therefore the 29 in 5 must contain an 8. We don't know which of those two cells contains the 8, so we can't remove it from the cell in row 4, column 2, but we can remove it from the cell in row 5, column 2, i.e. directly to the right of the digit 2, like this. OK, now we have 3 digits in that 29 in 5, the 3, the 9, and we know there's an 8 somewhere in there. This gives a total of 20 so far, with the remaining 2 digits adding to 9, to bring the total up to 29. There's only one way of doing this, and that's using 4 and 5. It is tempting to say, why not 6 and 3? We know there's a 3 in there, but the 3 has already been used. We need 2 extra digits to add up to 9. Unless there's another 3 in there, impossible of course, the cage can't include a 6. We can clear away any 5s from elsewhere in that row, and any digit 4 in the same column or row as the one we've just found, giving the following result. This in turn isolates other digits, so we repeat the process. You'll notice that we're very close to working out the composition of the 18 and 4 at the bottom of the grid. The 2 and 7 add to 9, so the other 2 digits must also add to 9, so that the total is 18. Normally, that would include the combination of 1 and 8, but look at the bottom cell in the central column. That contains either a 1 or an 8, so there's no way that the 18 and 4 can contain digits 1 and 8. We can remove both of those digits. Indeed, since the right-hand cell of that pair contains 3, 5 or 6, the left-hand one must contain 3, 4 or 6, to make up 9. We can apply the rule of 45 to the nonette in the bottom left corner. It has one bump, caused by the 19 and 4, and one dip, caused by the 27 in 6. Furthermore, the 2 cells in orange on the bottom row we've established must add up to 9. So if you add up all those cages enclosed with the red line, and the digit 2 which we've found, we get 19 plus 2 plus 15 plus 9, giving a total of 45. This is the total that we would expect for that nonette, meaning that the single-digit bump cancels out the single-digit dip exactly. Whatever the bump contains, the dip contains exactly the same digit. Any digit present in only one of them, such as the 8 in that dip, can be removed, like this. Now we are going to make one huge suppose and lead it to its logical conclusion. It's such a twister that I'm even going to change the graphic. Take a look at that 15 in 2. We are going to assume that the digit on the right is 8, so I've crossed out the 6. This implies that the other digit must be 7. And since the 7 is now accounted for, the digit above that 7 must be 3. We know that the bottom 2 digits must add to 9, so they must be either 3 and 6 or 4 and 5. But we've just used up the 3, so we can cross out the 3 and 6 from both those cells. And here's the contradiction. That right-hand column now has a 5 in it and an 8. Both of those have been found. So what's this cell supposed to contain? And here's the sticking point. We assumed that 15 and 2 contains 7 and 8, and found it led to an impossibility. So we know for certain that the 15 in 2 must contain 6 and 9. You might well be thinking, Richard, how on earth are we supposed to know we're supposed to do that? There's no way I could ever have worked that one out. Well, you're right. I didn't see it immediately either. In general, you have to carry out an awful lot of supposes before you find one that ends up in a reliable contradiction. Remember, it's the contradiction that we're looking for. Now, back to the original grid, this time with the 15 and 2 sorted out correctly. And having found a 6 and a 9, we can now wipe out a large number of the same elsewhere on the grid. Worth doing. In fact, we've now found some more digits, so repeat the process. Going back to the 18 and 4, we know that the 2 cells on the left must add to 9. There's only one combination that fits this, a 4 plus a 5. And we can tidy up digits here, there and everywhere. And tidy up again. And again. And having found 3 in the top row, we can clear up the top of the grid. Look at the 23 and 4 in red at the top. It contains a 3, a 6 and a 9, totalling 18. So the missing digit on the left must be 5 to bring it up to 23. Which leads, of course, to a tidy up. And another. And another. Now, take a look at the 19 and 4 in the bottom left-hand corner. Those cells only contain the digits 1, 3, 7 and 8. These digits can't appear anywhere else in that column, so we can remove the 1 and the 3 from the left-hand cell in row 4 and the 8 from the 2 cells above that one. There's now only one cell in that upper left nonnet that can be 8, the green one in the 27 and 6. I remove the 6 from that cell and take the liberty of removing the 8 from the 2 orange cells at the far right of that row. And I can't help noticing that we have a digit 3 in that row, so why are there 3s still in those 2 orange cells? How did they escape the net? Gone. Similarly, there's a digit 5 at the far left of the row below that one, and yet I see 2 digit 5s at the far right of that row as well. Let's get rid of them too. Look at the 7th column. The top 2 cells contain 1 and 6 and 3 and 6, and the bottom cell of that column contains 1, 3 and 6. Between these 3 cells, they account for the 1, the 3 and the 6, so there can't be a 1 in the yellow cell that is in the penultimate row. If we remove it, we've found the 5 for that nonnet. You'll notice that I've tidied up that nonnet also. Look at the top row. There are only 2 places the digit 7 could be, both in that light blue cage, 16 and 3. The other 2 digits must add up to 9 to make the total 16, so the cage can't contain a 9 itself. Think about it. Suppose the cage contained a 7 and a 9. What would the third digit be? Now we've removed 9 from that cage, we can also remove 4 from the cells, as it can't add to give 9 without a digit 5 in there somewhere. And we can remove the 6 from the lower cell in that cage, as there's no 3 in the upper 2 cells for it to add to. Now we know where the 4 is in that nonnet. And we can remove the 4s at the far left end of that row and the bottom of that column, which in turn tells us where the digit 4 must be in those 2 nonnets. The last 3 cells in the top row account for the digits 1, 6 and 7 between them, so there can't be a 6 in the top row of the 23 and 4. We can also remove 6 from all the other cells in that last nonnet on the top row, followed by a general tidy up. Having now found the 8 in the top right nonnet, we can remove it from everywhere else in that column. It also tells us that the only possibility for the 16 and 3 is 1, 7 and 8. And having found the 6 at the top of the 7th column, we can now remove it from the bottom cell in that column, leaving 1. This allows us to remove 1 from the other cells in that nonnet and that row. Look at the 13 and 3 at the bottom right of the grid. One of those digits is 4, so the other 2 must add up to 9. However, one of those digits must be 6, as it can't be anywhere else in that nonnet. The other digit must therefore be 3. And a general tidy up removes even more digits, followed by another, and even more. And there you are. The puzzle is finally solved. Now that was really a whistle-stop tour. I went very quickly, and no doubt you've had to backtrack and use pause and rewind a great deal. Sorry about that, there was a lot to get through. Relatively little of that puzzle turned out to be genuine killer Sudoku. Most of the solution was found by using the rules of normal Sudoku, which apply just as much in killer Sudokus as in the ordinary ones. While watching this video, you probably saw other strategies I could have used at various stages. Perhaps I didn't solve it in the most efficient way, but as long as nothing but watertight logic is used, all approaches will lead to the same solution. This example is also typical in one other respect. At the beginning it was easy. At each stage we were spoiled for choice as to what to do, with possibilities coming thick and fast. Gradually, as the low-hanging fruit was picked, the problem got a little harder, and we had to start using the suppose strategy more and more. Logical, but trickier to pull off. Then, as we entered the home stretch, we picked up speed again as it became easier and easier. This is a general pattern. So, while it will be a little optimistic to hope that you've enjoyed the video, at least it might have proved instructive. Try applying some of the techniques you've seen here while solving the less psychedelic killer Sudoku puzzles that you see online or in newspapers. And for the few visitors out there who actually missed the animation, the next video I produce will be animated. That's a promise.